Well, thanks, Wendy, and good afternoon to all. Welcome to this month's Conditions and Outlooks briefing. And as Wendy mentioned, I'm Tony Bergantino. I'm the director of the Wyoming State Climate Office and the Water Resources Data System. And the briefing today is presented by my office as well as the University of Wyoming Extension, USDA Northern Plains Climate Hub, National Weather Service office in Riverton, and the U.S. Geological Survey. And today we'll be covering current drought climate conditions, surface water conditions, go into forecasts and outlooks, and we'll follow that by a very brief discussion on El Nino in Wyoming and its effects and difficulties of forecasting. So we'll start out on the current conditions in the U.S. Drought Monitor map. This is the one that was released this morning, valid through 2 days ago, Tuesday the 14th. Conditions recently have been dry and warm and windy, and all three of those make a pretty bad combination when you're looking at drought. So the march of drought has continued into the south central part of the state, and abnormally dry, or D0, that yellow color there, along with some moderate drought, or D1, the brown, has expanded once again, unfortunately, compared to last week and to where we were during the last webinar. Just for comparison purposes, here's where we were a year ago compared to today. While we did have moderate drought in the south a year ago, which is still there, by and large, the state is much better off than we were at this time in 2022. Looking at the timelines, we got the updated timeline here. This is the percentage of Wyoming that is in each of those drought categories since the start of 2000, which is when the drought monitor started, and this goes through this Tuesday's drought monitor. After having dropped to zero, the levels of D0 and D1 have started to increase again, now covering almost 2 3/4% of the state being an actual drought, that D1 condition. The D0 is just that heads up, abnormally dry. The D1 to D4 categories make up a small portion of it, because you've got almost 8.9% when you conclude the abnormally dry, that D0 area. So zooming in, January of 2020 through 2 days ago, this shows the resurgence of drought a little bit better than you see on that full period timeline. The area of moderate drought is almost exactly doubled in size from the last webinar, going from, I believe then it was 1.37% to now at 2.73% for this week. Looking at the 14-day total precipitation as a percentile, unfortunately, not a lot of the greens or blues on this map, except in the far northwest and far southwest. Equally unfortunate are the large expanses of red, indicating that precip was in the 10th percentile or less in these areas that cover the Wind and Bighorn basins, much of Albany County, Goshen, Platte, chunks of Carbon, Natrona, Johnson, far southern Campbell, Weston, Converse County, and scattered parts of Niobrara, in case I leave any areas out. At 90 days, looking at it over the last 3 months, shows quite a bit of the state in the upper percentiles, the greens, blues, purples. Fair chunk is right about the median, which is shown there in gray. And unfortunately, and this corresponds with the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map, a lot of the south central part of the state, specifically eastern Sweetwater, much of Carbon County, it's showing up in the lower percentiles, even when you look at a 3-month period. Laramie County is also starting to show more and more precip falling below the median. Here we have where we stand during the current years. On the left is the current water year. Recall that this is the time frame that goes from October 1st to September 30th. So right now it's about 1.5 months. Central areas, northwest 2/3 or so is above average, but the south and northeast corner are coming in below average, especially southeastern Carbon County, far southern Albany County, extreme southwestern Laramie County, where totals have been under the 50% of average. 2 other small areas, southern Lincoln County, central Cook County, are similar similar in effect there. Looking on the right side, this is a lot better, but this is because this is the calendar year depiction, and the recent dryness that we've been experiencing is kind of masked by that wet spring and summer that we had. Most of this map is showing above average precipitation since the 1st of January. Although south central area that we've been talking about is showing average, and a few pockets of below average. Some areas of the Northwest, especially around the Tetons, have also received below average precip for the calendar year. Going to the Standardized Precipitation Index, or the SPI, this is the worst these maps have looked in a while, at least for the upper two. The two on the upper side, the left and right, there are the 30 and 60-day depictions, and the one on the bottom right shows the index over the last year. The dryness in south central Wyoming is showing up pretty strong at the 2-month time frame now, and at 30 days, an even larger percentage of the state has a negative index, with the magnitude being pretty strong in the southeastern, basically 2/3 of the state or more. At one year, things are a little on the wet side still, but even there, we're seeing some signs of the more recent lack of precip showing up. And with El Nino building, we'll have to be keeping a close eye on conditions statewide. Okay, temperature. Look at the temperature situation over the last 2 weeks. Here we have the actual temperatures on the upper left, departure from average on the lower or upper right and lower left. Loads have mostly dropped to below freezing for the last 14 days, 2-week period. Some exceptions in the western foothills of the Bighorns, central Wyoming, and over in Platte County. As a departure from average, above average across the entire state for low temperatures, almost the entire state. There's 2 minor exceptions down by Flaming Gorge and the Bags area. Everything else ranged up to 15 degrees above average, with most areas being in the range of 3 to 9 degrees above average. Going over to the maximums over that 2-week period, same period that we saw in the previous slide. On the upper right, actual temperatures again. The high temperatures still above freezing, except where you see those purples at the highest elevations in the north. Eastern Plains saw highs in the mid to upper 50s, while the rest of the lower elevations east of the divide generally were in the low to mid 50s. In terms of the departure from average, down here on the lower left, just like the lows, the state was for the most part above average, except for the area circling green up by the Clark's Fork and the Beartooths. Generally, departures above normal were greater as you moved east, with the Green River Basin being about 3 to 6 degrees above average, then the bulk of the rest of the state 6 to 9 degrees above average. And then finally, some of the eastern plains saw departures reaching up to as much as 12 degrees above average. And all this is contributing to the worsening conditions that we're seeing on that drought map earlier. Soil moisture, quite a mix on the soils front. Some degradation in the northeast, although still above average. An increase in moisture content in the northwest. A bit of improvement in the southwest, and some degradation in the south central areas. But all in all, not a substantial big change over the last 2 weeks. Frost, we're starting to get some areas of persistent frost in the upper Green River Basin, circled there in green. These are the state engineer's office stations showing frost depth down around 5 inches or so. Most of the other stations around the state have been having intermittent frozen soils, but so far they've been thawing out during the day, or have at least not remained frozen for any extended amounts of time yet. Snow, we're only in the 3rd week of November, so snowpack buildup is only beginning, but I still wanted to show the comparison to last year. On the map on the left from last year, we were already seeing that lower elevation snowpack, which was to become a theme for much of last year, sort of that inverted snowpack that we had. While a lot of the higher elevations last year at this time were below normal, a lot of the lower lying areas, especially in the north, were above normal. This year, showing only the highest elevations with any notable snow water equivalent, and quite a lot of that area is still below the normal. We're always hoping that that turns around as we progress into the season, since we know what that means for our water supply. And with that and water supply, I'll turn it over to Scott Whiteman with USGS to give us an update on stream flow conditions as we move into the winter doldrums. Scott?
Thank you, Tony. Like I said, I'm Scott Whiteman. I'm the Data Operations Section Chief here for the Wyoming Montana Water Science Center. So I oversee data collection activities in both states. This is just a map depicting current stream flow status as of today. And you can see the normal ranges from 25 to the 25th to the 75th percentile. So quite a long range in the percentile there for normal. But you can see much of the state is in a normal status. You can see in the south central area, we are in that slightly below normal range. And we have some areas up along the mountain ranges where we are much above normal. Next slide, Tony. This is just a duration hydrograph for Wyoming showing a 7-day runoff average. And you can see that fall precipitation continues to sustain a normal and above flow conditions for much of the state, and that above normal range is greater than 75th percentile. It is trending downward, but has been up since pretty much the middle of October, which is due to the storms in late September into early October. I think we'll see this come down in time as much of the moisture will start to come down as snow rather than rain. So next slide. Here's just a quick look at some select Wyoming stream flows. Here's North Fork of the Shoshone River at Wapiti, and you can see it is in that much above normal range, in that greater than 90th percentile for this time of year, which is just odd, but they did receive a fair amount of moisture in that area, and so that is expected with all that increased moisture. Next slide. Moving down to kind of south central, you can look here at the Encampment River, which was in that upper portion of the normal range, and is trending down as well, getting it down into that below normal for this time of year. Next slide, Tony. Here's just a quick look at Wyoming reservoirs, comparing October 16th to today. And there isn't really much of a change in reservoir contents. You can see up on the Bighorn is full. Things in the central part of the state are at that right around 70% of full range. Looks like we're draining out over in the southeast portion of the state there, but most of them are ranging in that 60 to 98% moving into the winter period. And for me, that is it. Not too much to report as far as stream flow.
All right, thanks, Scott. And looking forward with weather forecasts and outlooks, we next have Lance Vandenbogert with the National Weather Service in Riverton. Lance.
All right, hello everyone. We'll go ahead and just look at the overall kind of yearly picture of what kind of weather are we dealing with from now until mid-December. And you can see here that winter storms, we are in winter storm season, despite not having a lot of big winter events. We are moving into the heart of that season. Ice jamming can occur, although we've been fairly warm, so not seeing a lot of issues there. One thing to note, that the third one down, fire weather, that's actually, you can see that kind of the back end of that whisker, it stops mid-November, but given the lack of snowfall in the lower elevations, we actually had some zones become critical, and that might be extended this year kind of anomalously. And then high wind just last night, South Pass, or at least the gauge kind of up near South Pass from WYDOT, we had a gust to 101 miles an hour. It's in kind of a funneling location, so that's not representative of the whole Wind River range, but there are places that will gust quite strongly when we have one of these fronts or weather systems moving through. So we are in the heart of the high wind season. All right, stepping forward and just looking at the next week ahead, precipitation-wise specifically, You can see that a lot of the state is forecast to get some amount of precipitation over the next 7 days. There are a few pockets there without any precip in the forecast, but it is going to be unseasonably warm still, 5 to 10 degrees above average for most locations. You can't see that on the graph. But then there's precipitation moving across the south today, contributing to some of those higher values you see across the southern counties. And then our next chance for precipitation is going to be Sunday into Monday, where we have another wave moving through the area, and that's going to bring some widespread light precip, maybe a little bit more for areas like the Tetons, where they could see some higher totals. And if we step forward from here and just look at the week after next, so this is November 23rd through November 29th. As far as temperature outlook goes, it's kind of a mixed bag. We sit in between kind of the two larger scale above or below normals. The southwestern part of the state has a slight lean towards above normal, and then the northeast has a lean towards below normal. But both of those are quite they're very slight, I should say. So it's not a strong signal for that. Same can be said about the precipitation, as far as just a slight signal for above normal for much of the state, but not a lot of great confidence that it would be above normal precipitation for that week after next. All right, and then we'll take a little brief aside here before jumping into the 1 month and 3 month outlooks. Just a little note here about understanding El Nino, La Nina. This is not the end all to be said about these things, but a lot of times people get confused and they try and equate. They might not even know what El Nino really means for them. And this is one way to think about it, that when you hear terms like this, it's oftentimes people are referring to those longer term outlooks. And it's how does the global water and weather system currently look? Are there above normal temperatures in the Pacific Ocean or below normal in certain areas? And then how is that going to affect the overall jet stream over the next 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, those types of timescales? So just know that there is a connection between the ocean and the atmosphere. And sometimes you can gather information from the ocean and from the larger global water weather system that will affect Wyoming. And if we step forward one more, you can kind of see, without getting into the exact percentages, that's that left graphic. So I'm not even going to talk to the details there, but that's kind of a breakdown of the probabilities of whether it's going to be El Nino, La Nina, or kind of in between, which they call neutral. The way that I like to simplify it in my mind, at least, and I encourage you to maybe do so as well, is looking to something like the Climate Prediction Center seasonal outlooks, which we talk about often here on this call. It's one of our regular pieces that we discuss. Here at the local weather service offices, we are not climate experts, but we know some, and we are dangerous enough to be able to talk to these graphics. So this thinking of above or below normal temperatures and above or below normal precipitation, that's the way to go for the average user. Unless you're a climate scientist or an aspiring climate scientist, these may be your best resources as far as forward-looking type El Nino, La Nina type predictions. All right, so without further ado, jump into the 1 month outlook there. This is for the month of December. You can see I do like posting these, even though there's not strong chances. This does tell you something. There's not a big signal. So if you hear someone talking about how December is going to be frigid cold and one of the worst ones, well, that's not really what's being said here. There's equal chances for above or below normal temperatures, as seen on the left there. All that white area is equal chances. So climatology is going to be your best forecast. Same thing for the right-hand graphic there. The state of Wyoming does not have a clear signal as far as what that pattern the global climate pattern might bring for us over the month of December. So climatology, or near normals, are going to be your best forecast. And if we step forward to kind of the winter seasonal outlook, which is December, January, February, the picture changes a little bit. There might be some signal that can be gained, but it's still in that slight lean category. It's not in the very likely above, where you can be banking on above normal temperatures. But the northern half of the state does lean towards that above normal temperatures with how the current water weather global pattern is set up. And then if you look at precipitation, The northern, almost half or northwestern half of the state does have that below normal precip, a slight lean towards that, whereas maybe Cheyenne in the southeastern corner of the state has a slight lean towards wetter, kind of in between the overall areas of above or below. So a mixed message there. But again, neither of these are strong indications. I wouldn't go, telling my friends about how dry it's going to be all winter just based on this. This is a slight lean for parts of the state, and it gives you at least a little information maybe of what direction we might go on average. But all right, and I think that wraps up my section.
All right, thanks, Lance. Well, building on some of the slides Lance showed, I wanted to just briefly present a little bit of the work we're doing on El Nino, La Nina, and the effects on Wyoming. And obviously, I'll concentrate on El Nino since we happen to be in that phase right now. Now, the problem is Wyoming generally sits in the middle of the boundary area between the influences of hot, dry, cold, wet. So no two phases are really the same either. So that's why those predictions can be difficult. And if you look back in time forward to some of those 3-month outlooks, like the December through February, and if you're sitting back a ways, you're going to see a lot of those equal chances for us. And why is that? Well, here are 2 El Nino events, 1958, 1973, pretty similar, both the same strength, and look at the differences of what happened during the two. On the left there, you have 1958, and this is showing the departure from the 1950 to 2022 average in inches. And you can see that the Snake area there above average, Sierra Madres, that's in the Medicine Bow, had above average precipitation, a lot just around normal, and then some a little bit on the dry side. Now we step over to the 1973 event, again, same strength as the 1958, and you can see all the higher elevation areas, with the exception of the northern Laramie range, below normal precipitation, whereas a little bit above normal on the northern Laramie range there. But quite a comparison when you look at the two, especially considering that those were both El Nino and with the same temperature anomaly for the sea surface temperatures, and thus the strength afforded to that particular event. And the same thing holds, and even a little bit more dramatically when you look at temperature. Again, 1958 there on the left and 1973 on the right, and it'd be kind of hard pressed to find two more opposite years in terms of what the results were. And like I say, again, 2 similar El Nino events, same strength. So that's why sometimes when you're looking at an El Nino, it's a lot less, and the same holds true for La Nina. It's a lot less easy to make predictions on what's going on. So one of the ways that I've been kind of looking at things here, and one of the techniques is looking at the past occurrences and just seeing what the odds are for above or below average temperature and precipitation. So with that, I looked at all occurrences of El Nino since 1950 during the December to February timeframe. There were 25 of them, 25 events during that period. And these were then classified to see which of the cells had above average temperature or above average precipitation compared to that 1950 to 1922 average. And so then from that, you calculate the percentage of the El Ninos that were above average in terms of temperature and precip, and then the map is sort of coded with that color pattern there. So the higher percentages means there's a greater odds of above average temperature or an above average precipitation. And the pale pink, pale blue that you see on the temperature map is in that 40 to 60% range. So you could basically say those are neutral, are going to go either way. And the same with the pale browns, palish green on the precipitation side. And what you can see then, without looking at any of the modeling that is more effective as you get closer to the time period, generally 60 to 70% of El Ninos resulted in above average temperatures for December through February in the western 2/3 of the state. And for precipitation, about 70 to 90% of El Nino events resulted in below average precipitation in the at least in the northwest and south central parts. But as you can see on those charts, maps that I showed earlier, just because the odds favor one thing doesn't mean the other can't happen. And that's why these CPC outlooks, Climate Prediction Center maps that Lance was showing become much more valuable as you get closer to that time frame. When we're only a month out from that December through February time frame. And still, as you look at them, there's on the precipitation one, there's that even chances right in the middle of the state where sort of that boundary area between the influence that you'd normally see in the north and then the influence that you would see in the south. So just sort of to reemphasize what Lance was saying, go check out those CPC outlooks for basically the latest and greatest in the science for what's going to be coming up. And with that, I'll just send her back to Wendy Kelly, and she can take us into Q&A.
All right, great. Thank you, Tony, Scott, and Lance for presenting. And on this last slide, you can see each of the presenters' names and contact information. If you have any questions following the webinar, that you can reach out to them directly there.